Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning. On behalf of the Malta Chamber and RSM Malta, I would like to take the time to thank the professionals who are with us this morning, Dr. Karen Maria Borch, Dr. Paula Vassallo, and Dr. John Kakia. We are also awaiting Dr. Elaine Lautier, who will join us later to participate in the discussion. The webinar this morning is being supported by the COVID-19 Public Health Response Team and the Health Promotion and Disease Prevention Directorate. Today's webinar is titled Reshaping the Workplace from COVID Experiences, and we will focus on giving clarity to issues that businesses, HR managers, and other operational managers might be facing at the moment to help mitigate the spread of COVID. We will give you more insights, we will give you more support and clarity on discharge policies, testing, and other practical tips on how to control and prevent the spread of COVID at our workplaces. The Malta Chamber has called on all the business community to provide remote working options to our employees wherever possible. Only those workers who have no other option but to work on site should be asked to do so. The Malta Chamber continues to urge the business community at large to do their part by strictly observing the mitigation measures in the workplaces. We also call for stronger enforcement efforts in the context of more aggressive variants that we are noticing is increasing the spread of virus in a wider and more quicker way. But enough of this introduction. Thank you very much for joining us. And I look forward to a healthy and interesting discussion in this hour long. I remind the participants to use the Q&A function. Please feel free to ask us questions, and we are here to help you out. And our program will kick off with Dr. Paula Vassallo giving us an introduction.
Thank you. So, as a public health response team, we have issued guidances for offices and workspaces, and these are frequently updated. Over the next few minutes, I will be going over the key points and updating you also on the public health response team and also what happens when somebody does test positive for COVID-19. So, our backend, giving a brief introduction of who we are as a public health team. The backend of the public health response team is the senior advisory group, our coordination team. We have our team who does the epidemiological intelligence, and we have the team who does the guidance, development, our data management team, our communication, our administration and support, and our enforcement team. And these are the team which is at the back end of dealing with this pandemic, because then we move on to the team who also is at the front line, involved with our public health helpline, involved in our testing centers, involved in the management of cases, involved in the contact tracing, and also involved in following up the cases. And just to give you a brief overview, testing is one of the cornerstone of Malta's strategy in dealing with the pandemic. We are one of the countries which really tests. We're doing on average 3,500 tests on a daily basis. And this is a part also from what is being done within the private sector. Anybody who would need to do a PCR test or a rapid test, which are provided for free within the public service, can call our public health helpline on 111. However, anybody who has a foreign number would need to use the other number, the 21324086. Some people can also register online for a swab test on covidtest.gov.mt, and our agents from the call center will call back to give them an appointment according to their needs. We have numerous testing hubs, and once somebody actually does his swab test, we have two types of tests which are being offered: the PCR test, which is the gold standard, and the rapid test, which on the 12th of February, legal notice has been issued to actually regulate the use of these rapid tests, both the premises, but also the type of tests and the importance of notification of the results to the Superintendent of Public Health. If a PCR test is done, then the process is that these are tested, sent to our molecular diagnostic lab, and within 72 hours, the results are issued thanks to the support of the data management and results team. And if somebody tests positive, they are contacted and informed by the COVID initial assessment team, who informs them about the result, but also informs the family that the immediate household would need to stay also in isolation, mandatory isolation. This is followed up by our team from case management, who gets more information and more details about the symptoms, and also gets more details about the household members. Following this, our contact tracing team, and we have Dr. Karen Borg and Dr. Elaine Lautier, who would be giving us more insights, would actually then contact the positive case and get more information about his contacts. And this is where there's going to be important information, particularly for HR managers in workplaces who have a key role in collaborating with the public health team. Following this, somebody who tests positive will then be contacted by discharge team. Now, in the past, anybody who tested positive would be required to do a PCR test on day 11. However, following evidence which has come out from the European Centre of Disease Control, it is showing that for people who have been asymptomatic over the last, like day 9, day 10, day 11, then it would not be necessary for them to do a test on day 11, because the evidence clearly shows that the viral load on day 11, day 12 is very low, and the chance of them actually spreading it to any post day 14 is actually minimal. So for workplaces who are still requesting that they present a PCR test for them before to return to work, our policy, our discharge policy, if the employee is asymptomatic and has been asymptomatic for the previous 2 days, there is no need for them to do a PCR test. These are our different testing centers which we have. So we try as much as possible to be as comprehensive, to offer the service to ensure that we test to isolate anybody who tests positive. Now, as our key points which do emerge from our guidance is, as we heard from Ms. Rajir, the importance of remote working for those people who can actually provide remote working. This is one of the areas which is definitely going to help stop the spread of COVID. And I wanted to give a brief overview for the importance of also reminding our employees on the symptoms, because we hear of many cases where the employees go to work despite them having symptoms, however mild, and sometimes runny nose, a bit of a headache, a sore throat, the shortness of breath, cough, fever, tiredness, muscle pain, diarrhea, loss of smell, loss of taste. Important that even mild symptoms, we need to inform our employees not to come to work, even if they have mild symptoms, because we are getting cases of employees, of people who actually test positive, but they would only have mild symptoms. So anybody who has mild symptoms, basically discourage any employees from coming to work with mild symptoms. And the importance also to continue to educate our employees what the symptoms are and for them to do a self-check before coming to work. The wearing of masks, sorry, it's a typo, important of wearing masks properly and not wearing masks under one's nose. Important that in workplaces, as per the legal notice, people are to wear their masks and they cover their nose, mouth, and chin. Definitely, masks are preferable to visors, and if cloth masks are to be used, then it's important that the cloth mask should be made of 3 layers and that they are washed after each use. And when removing and taking of masks, important to have sanitizer which is easily available to prevent spread, because sometimes you can get employees who actually remove the masks from the front, touch surfaces, and that could be any potential for spread. The distancing, as much as possible, where possible, we need to have 4 square meters per staff member, a minimum of 2 meters between staff members, and hot desking should be avoided. And the importance of having sanitizer, alcohol wipes easily available to clean to clean the surfaces as much as possible, and also the use also of acrylic screens or perspex screens to provide also a barrier, for between colleagues in the same office, which would also help. The importance again of cleaning and disinfecting, the importance of having the frequently touched surfaces like lifts, the buttons on the lifts, door handles, keyboards, telephones, and also the availability also of sanitizers to allow employees for frequent hand sanitization, and also the use of paper towels. Ventilation, another area which has shown us how important it is. Ideally, it should be fresh air, open doors, open windows as much as possible. But if not, important that there is the air conditioning should be linked to a ventilation system and have at least 3 air changes per hour. So we have a whole document also on our website on ventilation for workplaces. And more important, the higher the ventilation, the better the situation, which we'll hear more also from our colleague later on. Encouraging our employees to download COVID Alert, because this will be a useful tool to help identify the contacts of somebody who has tested positive. Here, I'd like to make the emphasis that this is totally private. We do not, nobody has an indication of who the positive case would be. It is simply what happens when somebody tests positive. If he has the app, public health team would give him a code. The person who tests positive inserts the code, and for colleagues who have also got the app, if they have been in close contact with, as defined also by public health, with the person who tested positive, these would get an alert. So it is good for them, it's good for others, and it helps to protect them, their family, their loved ones, and the vulnerable ones. And just as a small point, the importance of remembering the mental health and well-being. We understand that this pandemic has taken its toll on everybody's mental health and well-being. To continue to support the staff in building their resilience, identifying persons at risk, and encouraging the staff to seek help if needed. Remembering the safer choices of location outside is always better as much as possible, even if you had to have meetings, the importance of distance and the importance of contact time when we do meet other people. And basically success in curbing this pandemic depends a lot on full cooperation from all sectors of society. So just there, we have information, we have a lot of information on standards for different workplaces continuously being updated with new legal notices being issued. And we have even the guidance for offices and workspaces on covid19health.gov.mt. So feel free to visit, and we will take any questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Paula. Now we have Dr. Karen, who is going to take us through a presentation.
Good morning. I'm Karen. I'm one of the doctors working in contact tracing, and together with my colleagues Elaine and Marika today, We'll be going through some important issues that we consider whenever we have a case within a workplace. So first of all, it's important to identify what makes the workplace such an important occupational setting within the scenario of COVID-19. And factors which contribute to the cluster formation and outbreaks could be working in an indoor confined space, as Dr. Paula has already mentioned, lack of social distancing, having close contact with someone who has tested positive, insufficient or incorrect use of face masks, and also presenteeism, which is when an employee reports to work despite having symptoms. One important thing to keep in mind throughout whatever is going to be discussed today is that each and every case is assessed on an individual basis. So even though we have guidelines to guide our contact tracing and for decisions to be uniform throughout the different scenarios, still our clinical judgment is extremely important in making a difference when managing the cases. When we define a high-risk contact, meaning if someone is in high risk, is a person, an employee, which will eventually be placed in quarantine. It will be defined as someone when, for example, they have had a face-to-face conversation with a distance of less than 1 meter with a positive case for 15 minutes if one or both are not wearing a mask. If both are wearing a mask, the time will increase up to 1 hour. Therefore, anyone who would fit these criteria would end up being defined as a high-risk contact. If there is a positive case within the same room or office or a closed space, then we will decide depending on whether the face mask was worn by both the positive and the contact, or else if the face mask was not worn. And then we have the criteria explained. For example, if there is a distance of less than 2 meters, then the high risk exposure would be if someone spent more than 2 hours in the same room. If the distance has increased to more than 2 meters, between 2 and 5, then the high risk exposure is if the contact has spent 6 hours or more in the same room. If the face mask was not worn, then obviously the time for one to be defined as a high risk contact will be less. So if there's a distance of 2 meters, high risk exposure will be when there is 30 minutes spent between the cases, or else if the distance is between 2 to 5 meters, a high risk exposure will be if there is a contact of 2 hours or more. I know that these are a bit technical, and this is exactly how we go through each and every contact and deciding where the criteria fit. It is also for anyone who is following to have an idea that we do not just simply send someone in quarantine. These are guidelines which we have developed following guidance by ECDC, and therefore each and every case will merit it will be decided whether they fit in these criteria, so we can be consistent even if there are different cases in different scenarios. If there is direct physical contact, for example, whether they have had a break together, there has been intimate contact, or there was someone who was exposed to infectious secretions, then that is automatically defined as a high-risk contact. We unfortunately have had a large number of scenarios with multiple cases. And in that case, we are extremely vigilant, especially now that we have the variant, which makes it more difficult to control the clusters developing within the workplace. So if there are 2 or more positive cases, which fall within the incubation period of the first case, so you have a case, the incubation period is more or less taken to be 14 days. If more cases develop within that incubation period, then those who are in contact with both of the positive colleagues at the same time will be deemed as high risk. And also if the individual was in contact with both individuals for a contact which is more than 15 minutes, regardless or not, whether masks were worn. So as you can see, common factors within these criteria would be whether someone was in the same room, whether they were in the same shift, and most important, whether masks were worn. So mask wearing is crucial. Extremely, we cannot emphasize this enough. And not only for someone to have a mask, but to wear it properly. When we speak of exposure, meaning the time spent with a person who was positive, exposure is cumulative. So if someone had a conversation with a positive case for 10 minutes in 2 consecutive days, over 2 days, then this is considered as being equivalent to 20 minutes. And therefore, quarantine would be warranted in that case. When we are contacted by workplaces, we usually ask them to gather some information. And I'm giving a small snapshot of the Excel sheet we usually send as a template, which has all the details that would need to be filled in. Obviously, we will be guiding the HR and whoever is helping us to work the case accordingly, but just to have a small idea of all the work which is entailed in contact tracing. I won't go into much detail because Dr. Paula has already explained most of these. However, the basics will always remain what is most important. So even recently, there has been a push for teleworking whenever possible. So that is for us something which will make things much easier, because if we have a positive case in a company where teleworking is facilitated, then each person will have 3 contacts rather than having to close down a whole floor like we have had companies having to do. Adequate ventilation, regular environmental cleaning, having clear policies and messages, and leading by example, and training and education for the staff to increase the awareness of COVID-19. When we mention the management of people with COVID-19 or their contacts, what we mean is that if there is an employee who is unwell, it is important for the employee to know that his place is not at the workplace, but to remain home and seek help, get tested. And if need be, it would be very important for the company to seek our help sooner rather than later, because obviously it's easier to control things when they are in the initial stages. If we had to choose one comment and one message that we would like to convey, is to please be proactive. In the past year, we have worked very well with some companies who have taken the initiative to begin contact tracing themselves, especially in the scenario we are in with such a backlog and such a large number of cases. So in this case, several companies actually start the process of contact tracing and identifying and self-isolating those employees who are clearly at risk, and then contacting us with the information so that we can guide them accordingly. There is our email address, and we are very willing to help anyone who has any queries or any cases that need to be tackled. And I hope that together we can manage to provide a safer workplace for all employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Karen. We have received a couple of questions, and I will also have some questions myself, but I would like to give some more time to the panelists themselves. Maybe there are some other points that you would like to put forward at this point before we switch to some questions.
Hi, hello. Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Sorry for joining in late. It's been a very hectic year and the days just keep on getting worse. So my name is, I'm Dr. Elaine Lautir. I'm the lead of contact tracing. I have an excellent team working with me, 2 of whom are with me here today, Dr. Karen Borch and Dr. Marika Borch, who is also available to answer anybody's questions. They've been with me for the past year to basically try to keep the general public as safe as possible, and also the workplaces. One important point that I would like to highlight before obviously any questions that come in were basically 2 points. The importance of mask wearing. I know that Karen has already talked about it, but cannot emphasize the importance of it, especially with the new variants. Please, everybody, wear your mask at the workplaces. The second, we have a very good relationship, I must say, with most companies, most company managers, and most HRs. Most company managers are proactive, and they sometimes even inform us, obviously, because you can understand, because of we have a backlog with the amount of cases that we have at the moment. But most companies, they actually inform us, they call me straight away because of a positive case in the company before I actually get to know myself through the normal channels. That is an important message I want to convey today. Please, as Karen said, be proactive. We will give you our email address. Send us an email straight away with any positive cases or any issues you have at the workplace. I have a group of team working with me also, who basically tackle workplace contacts straight away. At the end of the day, we want to keep workplaces safe as possible, to obviously keep people in the workforce as much as possible. One important thing, we usually get the occasional HR or manager who basically, they are not very compliant with giving us the names of the contacts that actually need to go into quarantine. I can understand their issues. My husband, he is a businessman, so at the end of the day, I can understand from where they're coming from. But please, we put people in quarantine to make sure we keep your company safe, not because we want, as some managers tell us, that we want them to run out of business, etc., etc. Actually, we are doing this to make sure that we stop the spread of the virus in your company, so your company can keep on working. I'm sure there are a couple of HRs who actually, some of them phone me nearly every day, and they know that when we work together, we promise that we keep each other safe and your company safe. So please work with us so we make sure that we stop the spread of the virus in your company. It's beneficial for your company, and then at the end of the day, it's beneficial for the rest of the public. Thank you.
Can I add a few words to this brilliant presentation by my younger colleagues? When you have trained such a nice group of people and seen them develop in their careers, you can but not be proud of one has achieved. I mean, I am proud to see my students today taking over these responses in such a beautiful and assertive way to keep our country safe. And I think it's credit to them that they've done all that they could to be able to keep this country safe. As the person who, together with a large group of people, have coordinated the guidances to keep this country safe, I must say that the first and only thing that we have tried to do from the beginning is to try and ensure safe business continuity. It was our first statement. It is still our first statement. It's going to be our first statement throughout all this pandemic, to keep businesses going safely. But in order to do this, we need everyone to be on board. We have discussed with companies, we have discussed with individuals, we have discussed with a lot of realities. We do understand that the workforce is not all the time at work. The workforce is outside work as well. And things happen not because workplaces are not taking care, but things may happen because of employee behavior outside workplaces. And that is frustrating, and that is something which we have encountered in reactions. But I think that what needs to happen at the workplace is, fortunately, being strict and being sticking to the principles. My colleagues have emphasized the issue of masks, but masks alone, without taking care of distances, hygiene, and not coming to work if you are ill, all together will give you a package, a safety package. We have seen it in reality, not with COVID, but with influenza. This year, because we kept a minimum, not, I dare say, a minimum of measures across the country, we have not had influenza. And that must be, is, as we have seen in Malta and all countries, that these measures do work. Now, the difference in the issue is this. One, because we are dealing with a more virulent and unknown virus, we could not do enough to stop COVID, because this is a new virus. And that is why it's a pandemic, because it's a new virus and we don't have the body response to it in our bodies. So it is even more important to stick to the prevention measures. But in the second instance, it's because we have tried to give you advice, we have tried to keep you going. And we have been flexible with people's risks assessment. For example, we have not said everybody must wear masks. If there are risks in wearing a mask, keep your distance. If you're working in somewhere where there's a risk of fire, we can't tell you to wear a mask, but then keep your distance. We have told you, please try and keep the workforce at home if they can work from home. But we've not said, don't bring them to work. We've said, they have to be at the office. If you have made an assessment that they have to be at an office, then you make sure that the distances can be respected. So your barriers are up, your distances are up, your desks are spaced. We have gathered experience over the year, because please remember, this virus was new for us as well. So our learning curve has been steep. The learning curve of our companies has been steep. The resilience of our companies has been steep. And this is to the credit of Maltese businesses in coming to terms with what has happened. Now, let me, as a final comment, talk a bit about mental health and well-being in the workplace. This is going to be the challenge after the pandemic. This is going to be the parallel pandemic, because we have already seen people bursting and burning out. We have seen people edgy, etc., etc., etc. And the issue is this: it's going to get even worse when more people are vaccinated, and people keeping saying, "I'm vaccinated. I don't have anybody. I don't have risks, personal risks." Please remember, there are other people who may be at risk because they're not vaccinated. Until we get national herd immunity, we need to keep our guards up. But what will happen, definitely, is there are people who have been scarred by what's happened in the last year, and those scars in some people are going to be a permanent issue with anxiety, with depression, with action, relationships, and maybe loss of income, maybe, and that is going to result in mental health issues. So please take heed of the 3 points we put on that slide. Do what you can within your company to build resilience. So helping employees to be slightly better emotionally, take care of the emotions of employees, have a good laugh together if one can, even by remotely. I mean, be good to each other. I mean, this sort of being good instead of trying to repel the negative by being good. Second thing is, please be aware, particularly HR managers, be aware, and supervisors, and make your supervisors aware that some people may be suffering already from mental health issues. And the third is, encourage people who are hard pressed in getting these issues to seek help. I cannot emphasize enough these 3 important issues. The disease will come and go. The disease process will come and go. The scars maybe there is a permanent mark. So we need to tackle those cars now and continuously to be able to reduce this burden on our people. But there is a silver lining at the end of the day. This will pass. Let's go through it together, but let it pass with both physical and mental well-being at our forefront. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kakia, for that, and thank you, Dr. Lautir, for your intervention. If I can just take 1 minute, or maybe even less, but maximize this opportunity. As someone who has had to go through the disease itself, and also having gone through the support, the relentless support of the medical team in this country. My mother was under intensive care because of COVID and made it through, thankfully, all well, of course with side effects now, but I think I cannot stress enough on a personal note about our role that we play at our workplaces to keep them safe, to constantly educate and raise awareness with our peers and our employees, our competitors, our suppliers, our partners, everybody. We have to be very vigilant, very judicious, use a lot of skepticism, and maintain a rational outlook as to how to minimize risks. But enough of that, we need to give space to questions that we have, very interesting questions that we have this morning. So let's start with the first one. Hello, so public health is promoting high ventilation. At the same time, this may create drafts with a higher velocity. Cannot this draft create a hazard in itself as a medium to transfer virus? Could I have an answer, please?
Can I take this one myself? Because we have, in my team, researched quite extensively before issuing the ventilation guidelines. And fortunately enough, those were issued in June, but they have stood the test of time throughout the last 9 months. And I think they've been robust enough not to require any changes, actually, since last June when we did them. But remembering that the evidence available from engineering societies across the world was very spurious, and we had to adapt those guidelines to be able to make them Maltese in their outlook. There are countries where air conditioning is something which they don't talk about, and obviously our climate is completely an air-conditioned based system because of the weather that we have. Now remember that COVID-19 is the virus is a very heavy virus. So its likelihood, the likelihood of it being carried distances is much less. Our insistence on 2 meters, you will find documents which say 1.5 or 1 meter. We've always said 2 meters, recognizing the weight of the virus itself. Now, if you look at our choirs guidelines, for example, we talk about 3 meters because there is the possibility that with high vocal performances, viruses may travel longer, but not longer than 3 meters. Why ventilation? Ventilation and velocity, and air changes rather than velocity more importantly, is because the number of viruses circulating in the air will be drastically reduced when you have a higher number of air changes. The issue is a balance between the weight of the virus, the comfort of the room, and the safety of removing viral loads from within the environment. This is a balance. No, the issue is the more ventilated the place is, the less risky it is for people to be able to be infected from the ventilation system around them.
Thank you, Dr. Kakia. Let's move on to another one. We are aware that employees who come into contact with a positive case need to self-isolate and to swab after 5 to 7 days. Can you please confirm this and how it is handled? Thank you. Who would like to take this?
Hi. At the moment, our policy, if somebody does test positive, then there is no need for him to re-swab after 5 to 7 days. Now, as I emphasized also before, that mandatory isolation for somebody who tests positive starts from the day of the test and is for 14 days. If the person is asymptomatic over the 10th, 11th, 12th day, there is no need for him to do another test. And on day 14, he will be discharged at midnight and be able to go to work on the 15th day without needing another test on day 5, day 7, day 11, day 12.
Hi, good morning. With regards to contact tracing of employees at the workplace, like any other setting, so if someone is deemed as a high-risk close contact of someone who tests positive, they are identified as they require quarantine. If they have high-risk close contact, they have to stay for 14 days in quarantine from the last day of exposure to a positive case. They can test, but even if their swab result is negative, they still have to continue their quarantine for 14 days after exposure from a positive case. So having a swab test as negative, you still have to continue your quarantine. So you don't do a test and return to work, you continue the 14 days of quarantine.
Clear, thank you. We have another question. If a person has contracted COVID, would they still be able to get vaccinated?
They can, what we are suggesting that if somebody has his appointment while he's COVID positive, he has to postpone his vaccine appointment and he can get vaccinated 4 weeks after the start of his symptoms. So it would be approximately 2 weeks after he is released from quarantine. Yes, he can get it.
Thank you.
Also, something else to add, if someone is put in quarantine and they have a scheduled vaccination appointment, because they are in quarantine, they cannot attend for the vaccination appointment. They have to call 145 to postpone the vaccination appointment or send an email. Okay?
Yes, thank you. Clear. Can the vaccine give the virus in some way to the other person who has not yet been given the jab?
This is an absolute no. There is no live vaccine. There is no live virus in the vaccine. The vaccine is completely neutralized vaccine material. You will never get a vaccine infection, a viral infection from the vaccine itself.
Thank you. How long does it take a person to become immune after the jab?
Well, immunity is a rising issue. You get a partial immunity after the first jab. And from the we have the comfort now of having to look at, first we had very few people have been vaccinated. So the results from the first studies, which allowed for the use of the vaccine, showed us preliminary results which were on 40,000 vaccinations. We have now millions of people have been vaccinated, but the results seem to be confirmed by this situation. You will get full immunity 10 days. You start to get full immunity 10 days after the second jab. It doesn't mean that after the first jab, you're not starting to prop up your immune status. Yes, it does start to prop up, but we deem that you are fully safe from a point of view of immunity building after 10 days after. Now, again, this is 10 days after the second jab. This is another issue which I need to draw your attention to. Not everybody has the same level of production of immunity. This is a variable which depends on a lot of features, some of which we understand, some of which we don't understand. But on a maximum level, 10 days after the second jab is when you have the comfort of having the start of full immunity.
Thank you, Dr. John. If an employee goes abroad, can the employer ask him to quarantine, utilizing his personal level, I think, so that the other employees are protected.
So it is important that if you have any employees who are coming from non-corridor countries, that human resource managers should actually ask them from the email which is sent to them by the vetting team within the public health response team. This is done because employees who are coming from non-corridor countries need to spend 14 days in quarantine. So it is important for them to be able to assess that these actual employees, following the receiving this vetting letter, are actually doing these 14 days in quarantine in order to protect the other employees, the workplace, the business, and also the rest of the population. So getting human resource managers to actually ask these employees for the vetting letter will actually provide support to ensure that these people have actually informed us and got permission to come in order to prevent the spread of the virus, particularly in view of the new strains which are around, particularly in other countries as well.
Thank you. Is preventive fumigation with a chlorine solution recommended? Dr. John, you're...
Can I take this one? Fumigation does not really do the difference. We are more in favor of scrubbing and cleaning. Scrubbing surfaces and cleaning. Cleaning with conventional detergents, scrubbing, and then sanitization after scrubbing and washing. Fumigation, we have issue. We are not pushing that on a recommendation basis. Our favorite, as some of my colleagues amply put it, elbow, using your elbows. Correct, ladies?
Okay, we have other
and
questions.
Keeping in mind that when I talked about viruses, surfaces, since viruses are heavy and settle on surfaces, you need to be very careful about surfaces. So floors, desktops, chairs, tables, these need to be cleaned, scrubbed, sanitized.
Thank you. What is the advice when having employees with disability? Thank you.
Well, sorry about this, but I will have to take this one too. I'm defending the rights of minorities, particularly disabled, elderly, and mentally ill persons. These people with disability can lead an active, normal life. So they have to be assisted, supported. They are not to be treated differently from the rest of the group, but they have to be treated according to, as one of our colleagues have to put it, every case on its own merits. If these persons can work from home, they should be given the facility to work from home. But their disability does not in any way, or should not in any way, hinder their active participation in the local market, in the workforce. They are no different from the rest. If the disability is purely from a disability perspective, they are vulnerable from the issues of that we've talked about, the vulnerability concerning disease, medical conditions, past medical conditions, diabetes, cancer, taking certain medications, then yes, they require even some more thought there, because they need to be helped and not exposed unnecessarily. But let us that is one size fits all approach is not something that one should be talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of more questions. Are there controls at the airport to control incoming people from non-corridor countries, or is it the responsibility of HR managers? Can an employee leave Malta without the public health permission?
At the airport, all the documents, we have a team, a company who actually vets all the documents for people coming from amber countries. Now, what could happen, is that the employees could also come to a non-member country and put in some false declaration on the travel declaration form, because anybody coming to Malta has to complete 2 documents, a passenger locator form and the travel declaration form, whereby they declare that they have come and they have spent either 14 days in a corridor country to be able to travel to Malta. So if there is some false declaration, this is why we would like the support of the HR managers to ensure that these people who would be coming from non-corridor countries and who would need to quarantine, this information would be available, because these people would then not have clearance from public health to the team who are dealing with the vetting email, which grants permission for these people to come to Malta. So if these people have actually put in a false declaration, then the support from HR managers would be greatly appreciated, because we would realize that these people can then be put into quarantine to prevent the spread of the virus.
Thank you. People who have tested positive are required to do a swab to return to work, or asymptomatic only are not required to take a swab before they come to work. We had people who remained positive for more than 14 days. Wouldn't they be a risk to others?
Basically, our current that some people could at day 14 still be testing positive with a PCR. However, the evidence from the European Centre for Disease Control clearly would show that if they have been asymptomatic in the last few days, not necessarily asymptomatic throughout the whole 14-day period, but if they have been asymptomatic in the last few days, then their viral load and their chance of actually spreading it is actually negligible. And this has been, in fact, this is why it was not initially we used to ensure in the past, we used to ensure getting a PCR test on day 11. However, following all the evidence which has come out, because as Dr. Kaskia was saying, this is a new virus, it clearly emerged that post day 14, for people who have been asymptomatic for at least 3 consecutive days, in the last days, then the risk of actually transmitting the virus to anybody is close to none. So the risk is not there.
Thank you. Final 2 questions. What mitigation measures can be taken in places where work, for example on machinery, dictates that persons have to work shoulder to shoulder? Do perspex barriers work?
Yes, perspex barriers work, so long as they are kept clean and sanitized regularly by the employees themselves and cleaned properly every day, cleaned and sanitized every day. Another important arrangement that can be made, if one makes shifts, employees to look in the same direction and not face to face. If you have a situation where you need to operate machinery, and it is possible to do it, you should be placing employees facing all in the same direction, not facing each other. Those are 2 mitigation, plus perspex, plus distances where it is possible. Masks, obviously, are all mitigation measures on the actual shop floor.
Thank you. We have a recommendation or an idea here, proposition. Within the industry, it is in our interest to quarantine employees who may have been in contact with a confirmed case. May you allow HR to have access to the COVID Alert app to enable us to perform a risk assessment and to ask those employees who are deemed at risk to self-isolate. In this manner, it would be in our interest to encourage employees to download the app, and it also supports your tracing teams. Thank you.
Sorry, but this issue, the COVID-19 alert app there's a data protection issue which has to be respected. The COVID-19 alert is an individual taking a responsible decision to alert himself and alert others that he has been in contact or he has had a contact. We cannot go away from the data protection issues which have to be respected in developing this app. So for data protection reasons, Mr. Camilleri, it is not possible to take up your idea. You please, I would rather encourage staff and employees to be part of the COVID-19 alert app so that they can actually alert others who have been in contact with them that they are at risk. But we cannot, absolutely cannot, should not give any impression that we're not respecting in any way the data protection legislation which covers and backs the way in which the COVID-19 alert app works. Thank you.
Thank you. And we finally have a recommendation regarding the circulation of the presentation.
Can I just pass a quick comment? I can understand the worries of certain managers in companies with regards to this. The thing is, if any manager in a company feels that there is someone in his company that might have come in contact with someone outside the company, please send us an email straight away. We'll phone them and we will discuss with them. So we are an open door here. So even the managers, please get in touch with us, even if they believe that there was a contact outside the company. Our email address is covid19.tracing@gov.mt. Tell them to write attention Dr. Elaine Lauter, myself, so these emails pass through me, and we'll take care of them straight away, and we'll get someone to phone the manager straight away. As Dr. Kakia said in the beginning, at the end of the day, our main aim is for the safety of the company. So in any way we can help, we are there to help.
Thank you, Dr. Elaine. And so finally, the point was whether we can circulate the presentations, especially the data on distances versus time versus wearing or not wearing masks. Would that be okay with the panel that we
yes.
circulate?
I will forward the presentation. No problem.
Thank you. And finally, if you may, please repeat the email, covid19.tracing@gov.mt. But I just want to make sure I repeated it right.
We can write it in the chat.
Yes, please do.
Okay. Just maybe one last point. It's important that all employees who are sick do not go to the workplace. It's very important because for contact tracing, we have to go, the person can be infectious from 2 days before symptom onset. So the more someone continues going to work or going out, the contact tracing period will be longer. So we will be possibly putting more and more people in quarantine. So everyone who has any symptoms of COVID, it's important not to stay at home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, one last point. Obviously, my colleague, Dr. Karen Porter, will be forwarding the PowerPoint. Now, from experience, please, HRs, keep the PowerPoint to yourself. The reason being that it is beneficial for the HRs, but once people in the workplace see how our contact tracing, our risk assessment is done, they will, well, I'm just going to use the problem. They will just lie to us to make sure that they are not put in quarantine. Most of the HRs that we have been working with, they have already these slides. So we have no problem with giving them to the HRs. But please, HRs and managers, for the benefit of your company, do not share them with their employees. Thank you.
And following up also what Dr. Marika was saying, the importance that even mild symptoms, you know, somebody tells you like, yes, I normally, like spring is coming, I get a runny nose, you know, I get headaches, but please, any symptoms, please do stay home. And if necessary, you know, symptoms, book yourself a swab test, you know, because part of our strategy is definitely test, identify, isolate if you test positive. So do keep in mind that even mild symptoms. So for us, even as HR managers, to actually keep on educating our employees on the symptoms of COVID. You know, it's imperative because this is one way in which we can work together to ensure business continuity and prevent the spread of an outbreak, particularly in a workplace.
May I repeat once again that we do understand the frustration of companies where employees keep misbehaving outside their place of work. And I do understand that frustration. We do get those vibes, but at least one should make the efforts, and it pays, to keep the workplace itself safe. That is the best way that companies can do to protect their own business, keeping their workplaces safe, because it is there that we need to be really careful to do our part. Can I just emphasize that we do understand your frustration, but I do get the vibe, and I will be more straightforward than Elaine has been in saying what she said. Yes, people get intelligent in what they tell us and not tell us to be able to escape quarantine. And that is a bad thing, not because it's counterproductive at the end of the day, because it will take us longer to get out of the issues linked to the pandemic. Thank you for that, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to address you today.
Thank you, Dr. Katia. So we've had quite a number of comments thanking you for taking the time this morning and reminding us and helping us clarify certain issues. Again, I thank you very much, all the medical team in Malta, for your relentless care and dedication and support and resilience. May God give you even more energy to help us through this pandemic. And finally, closing off, thank you everyone for being with us this morning. And the Malta Chamber calls on all its members and the members of the country's business community to heighten the vigilance at this time. All the protocols we've heard this morning have to be observed. Wish you all a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.